Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. I'm sorry I'm a bit late on this video. I was quite busy yesterday, but here you are. Erik Karlsson, the best defenseman in the NHL, has been traded in a massive 3-team blockbuster deal to the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins received Erik Karlsson, Dylan Hamaliuk, and Rem Pitlick, as well as San Jose's 2026 third-round pick. Meanwhile, San Jose got Pittsburgh's 2024 first-round pick, Michael Granlund, Jan Rutta, and Mike Hoffman. And lastly, the Canadiens received Pittsburgh's 2025 second-round pick, Jeff Petrie, Casey DeSmith, and Nathan Lagar. This deal was expected because Erik Karlsson was not going to play in San Jose again. San Jose sucks. Erik Karlsson is the opposite of that. He is the best defenseman in the NHL. He just won the Norris Trophy. He is getting up there in age, and it's possible he does not repeat that season. In fact, it would be very surprising if he repeated the season he just had. Although he was on an awful team and now he is on a much better team. We're also expecting him to go to Pittsburgh because we knew that Kyle Dubas, the new GM of the Penguins, wanted him quite a bit. And they were one of the few teams that if they cleared a couple of older veterans with pricey contracts, they would have been able to afford it. Most teams cannot afford Erik Karlsson. San Jose actually retained $1.5 million. But even still, Pittsburgh has to pay more than 10. Erik Karlsson is not a cheap player. So that means that limited the teams that could have traded for Erik Karlsson. Pittsburgh's last general manager, Ron Hextall, made some mind-blowingly stupid moves, which Kyle Dubas managed to erase pretty much every single one of them in this one trade. He traded for Jeff Petrie, who was too expensive and aging. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't great. And Kyle Dubas, just like that, Jeff Petrie's gone. Now, Jeff Petrie had a no-trade clause, which meant that he could decide where he wanted to go, and he did not want to go to San Jose. Hence why the Habs had to be included in this deal, because Petrie apparently was fine with going to Montreal, but he did not want to go to San Jose. But the Penguins needed Petrie's cap hit gone so that they could afford Erik Karlsson. They also overpaid defenseman Jan Rutta, who they managed to ship out to San Jose. Probably the most infamous move of Ron Hextall's tenure as the Penguins GM was trading for Michael Granlund this past deadline. The Predators managed to ship out Michael Granlund for a second-round pick. Despite Granlund being pricey, they didn't have to retain any cap hit. They traded a pricey veteran who just wasn't performing the same way anymore for a second-round pick. I was reading all the trade grades for this. Penguins got like Fs straight across the board, and that portrayed it because Granlund just did not perform in Pittsburgh. It's not like that move actually ended up turning out. He did not perform. Meanwhile, Predators got a second-round pick and dumped some players' salary that they can use to start retooling, which they have. So Predators did amazing, but Penguins did not there. So all in all, I think the Penguins are going to be a playoff team next year. In fact, I think they could end up being the third best team in their division, only behind the Hurricanes and Rangers. Call me crazy, but I think they might end up with a better record than the Devils. Although I do think it will be a close race. But I cannot see a scenario unless there's tons of injuries. And maybe I'm just screwing myself over here. I've already said the Senators are going to make the playoffs. And now I'm saying that I cannot see a scenario where the Penguins don't make the playoffs. I might end up eating my words on these things. We'll see. But those are my two takes. First of all, Senators are going to make the playoffs. Second of all, Penguins are going to return to the playoffs. Both of those teams should be playoff teams. And it will be very interesting to watch the Eastern Conference this year because there are quite a few teams that are right on the brink of it, such as teams like Detroit, teams like Florida. Can they make the push again? They barely scraped in last time. Teams like Ottawa, teams like Buffalo, who are pretty good despite not having superstars. Teams like the New York Islanders, who made the playoffs last year, but can they make it again? Teams like the Capitals and Penguins, who are pushing themselves to make the playoffs after missing it last year because they still have their old cores who were superstars. So, it will be a very fun time watching the Eastern Conference this season. The one team I do not think is going to change is the Montreal Canadiens. I think they did pretty well with this trade. They ended up getting a second-round pick. They did have to take Jeff Petrie back, but he is a solid defenseman, and there are many rumors that he will get flipped, which I believe. I suspect Jeff Petrie will end up getting traded again before the season starts because of the fact that Montreal doesn't need him. He's a 34-year-old defenseman. Montreal has no use for that. They're not competing, and Petrie's still not a bad player, so they might have to retain a bit of a cap hit. But I suspect that they are still going to be able to trade Jeff Petrie and get some more picks. So all in all, Montreal got a couple more picks, so pretty good on them. I don't think in the short term they're going to be competing, but in the long term, this could help a lot. The one team that I think absolutely hurts me during this trade, it's mind-blowing how bad it was when you look at it from their perspective, is San Jose. As I started off this video with, Erik Karlsson is the best defenseman in the NHL. Now, he was a bit pricey. It was expected that they might have to retain $1 or $2 million. But the fact that they only got one first-round pick, one, for the best defenseman in the league, is mind-boggling. Not only that, but they took on a couple bad contracts, Michael Granlund and Jan Rutta. Both of those guys are not going to help the team and are not great players. Honestly, I think their contract makes them have more or less negative value because their contract is so bad, their production cannot outweigh their contract. Which means that they took on players that aren't going to help, but it makes sense given that they're not going to compete. But given that they did take on those players, then they should have gotten even more. I think they should have gotten at least 2 first-round picks in this deal, if not more, and maybe another young prospect of the Penguins. Because Erik Karlsson is a superstar, Sharks retained salary, and then took on a couple other players with heavy cap hits that really aren't going to help the team remotely. So it blows my mind why the Sharks couldn't have asked for more. Maybe it's because Erik Karlsson took this team by the reins, pretty much, because they had no choice. Erik Karlsson was not going to play for them again, which means that they had to trade him. So maybe with all of that, the Penguins just said, hey, we know we don't have to pay that much for this guy because he's not going to play for you, so you guys are going to trade him regardless. But even still, I think the Sharks could have squeezed a lot more out of this deal. I am disappointed in their return for Erik Karlsson. So without Erik Karlsson, and without pretty much anyone else, the Sharks are looking to get the first overall pick. My projection is that they will be battling with the Flyers to see who can be the worst team and get the first overall pick. I suspect those will be the 2 bottom teams by far. I think the Canadiens will be slightly better. I still don't think they'll be remotely making a playoff push. But I think they'll be good enough that they're respectable, at least. They're not just a joke. And I think in a couple of years, for sure the Canadiens will be back in the playoffs. I'm not so sure about the Sharks, because they have a long ways to go. And based on this trade, I don't think they got much better. They could have looked for the future even more, taking a couple more picks or prospects, but they really didn't. They have one first-round pick that's top 10 protected even. So even if the Penguins manage to absolutely suck, let's say Crosby gets injured, Karlsson gets injured, I don't know, this whole team would have to be injured, and they get a top 10 pick. Penguins keep that pick, and it moves on to 2025. So it seems like San Jose is a long ways, like 4, 5, 6 years before they're even pushing to make the playoffs again. They have a ways to go. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, the Penguins will be a fun team to watch this year. You'll have one of the best defenses in the league with Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, Marcus Pettersson, and Ryan Graves. Those four are probably one of the best top 4 defensive groups in the NHL, along with what I, just off the top of my head, I would say the Leafs, Hurricanes, and Avalanche are the only ones that are rivaling that. And they still have a good goalie, and obviously they still have Crosby, Malkin, Guentzel, who will be injured for the start of the season, but he'll come back, Brian Rust, and plenty of others up front. So this team is going to be fun to watch. But for now, thanks for watching.